Are anybody's toes as frozen as mine? I can't get them unthawed this morning. I want to say first that I visited chapel here a couple of times, and you guys have something really special here at Ozark. Your worship is really joyful, and it gives joy to my heart to participate in it with you. And if you had a Tuesday tour group out here, like I've been here before on a Tuesday, if I was sitting there as a prospective student and I heard that riotous welcome, I'd feel pretty welcome and like I would be missing something if I didn't come here to school. Just a little aside. So it's just a few days before Valentine's Day, and I'm guessing that maybe that wish book that I've heard about is in hot demand, looking for a new date or maybe even someone to marry. Well, it's not, I don't have any surefire tips for you, but it's my great privilege today to talk to you about that next big step, the value of marriage. So if you close your eyes for a second and picture marriage, you probably get a pretty specific picture in your head. We women sure do. But all of us likely see a bride and a groom, and then maybe a little string of little people following along behind. We get a specific and similar picture because marriage has an institutional meaning for us. The comedian Groucho Marx once said, "Marriage is a wonderful institution, but who wants to live in an institution?" Well, yes. Why would we? What does it mean to say that marriage is an institution? Let's look at the definition on the slide. The definition is an established organization, a significant practice, relationship, or organization in a society or culture, something firmly established, especially of a public character. So examples of institutions include this college. When you filled out the application for Ozark, you knew hopefully that you would attend classes, have homework, listen to professors, and eventually wear a cap and a gown. Ozark is actually an institution within another institution, the institution of academia. You could go to another college in another state, and you would expect pretty much the same thing. Class, professors, books, pizza, and poverty. Other examples of institutions include the church, the government, and even baseball. You don't have to know everything about it to know that if you see 9 men scattered on a field wearing caps and carrying a little ball, that is not football, it's baseball, and that's because it has patterns that have distinguished it and made it an American institution. So what makes marriage an institution? For starters, marriage is a publicly recognized relationship. Whether the wedding happens in a church or in the clerk's office or out in the field, vows and promises are made before other people. It's also understood that the man and woman marrying will enter a sexual relationship, that they will be faithful to one another, that they will cooperate for a lifetime to build a home and to care for children born to them. The public recognition, sexual relationship, fidelity, lifetime cooperation, all of these are hallmarks of what we call the social institution of marriage. I think it's fair to say that a majority of people in this room have already or will enter marriage with these expectations of both themselves and of their spouse. I also think that most of us would have a problem if your beloved wanted to keep your marriage strictly private or did not want sex to be a part of it. You would say, "Hey, what's the point? That's not marriage. That's the kind of relationship I have with everyone else." You would respond this way because you know that marriage is and requires something very specific. The institutional understanding of marriage is not unique to America. It's not unique to Christianity or even to a specific government system. While the trappings of a wedding ceremony look very different, it's still understood in a variety of countries, cultures, governments, and religions in much the same way we understand it. So why does marriage even exist? The short answer is because it is extremely practical. But as Christians, we go to Genesis for our definition of marriage, to where God created man and woman, and then to Matthew, where Christ quotes Genesis to tell the Pharisees that God's plan for marriage is unchanged in spite of polygamous practices and their many divorce laws. But marriage is so practical that within the history of government, we find early evidence for its purpose. In his book, The Future of Marriage, David Blankenhorn tells about Lipit Ishtar. You can tell me later if I say that wrong, but Lipit Ishtar, a ruler in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley in lower Mesopotamia around 1900 BC. The laws he wrote are among the world's first known legal codes. But we are paying attention to them today because several of them are about family relationships. He wrote, "With a decree, I made the father support his children. I made the child support his father. I made the father stand by his children. I made the child stand by his father." Now, this seems sort of self-evident to us. Why did it need to be put into law? Well, consider for a moment that 2,000 years before Christ, the identity of a child's father may have been difficult to establish, especially without marriage. As one marriage scholar has said, "When a baby is born, there is bound to be a mother somewhere close by." If we want fathers to be equally involved in their children's lives, biology alone won't get us very far. The word for the way cultures attach fathers to the mother-child bond in virtually every known human society is marriage. Then and now, marriage is a practical response to human social needs, and it strengthens the social fabric of family, churches, communities, and countries. My friend Maggie again says it better than I could. The institution of marriage attempts to connect sex, love, babies, caretaking, and mothers and fathers without requiring every individual person to stumble upon these moral truths and natural realities all on their own. That is what institutions are for. They are substitutes for the process of requiring individuals on their own to figure out best practices without any aid from civilization. Marriage would not have become so universal if it was not so valuable. It provides a framework that meets the physical and relational needs of women, men, and children in ways that are healthy and protective. Communities and thriving civilizations have depended on it for their very survival. So let's fast forward to the last 50 years in America, because that's where the strength of the fabric, that institutional definition, has been challenged in unprecedented ways. For some, first, I'm going to give you some history on the law of no-fault divorce, because the first no-fault divorce law was passed in California in 1969, and I'll explain what that means. Previous to no-fault divorce, when a husband or a wife wanted to end a marriage, they had to prove in a court of law that there had been fault, such as abuse, adultery, or neglect. In contrast, fault does not have to be proven with no-fault laws, and that's pretty much what we have in all 50 states now. Either the husband or the wife can dissolve the marriage when they want to without any input from their spouse. As the no-fault legislation was debated and ultimately made into law, many hoped that it would make things easier for everyone when a marriage broke down. But in fact, the California governor who signed the first no-fault law was Ronald Reagan, who was divorced from his first wife. In reality, the no-fault law prioritizes the desire of just one person. It doesn't stabilize anything. It prioritizes the desire of just that one person, the person who wants out of the marriage. The spouse has no legal recourse if they want to try to keep the marriage together, and no-fault law is virtually silent about the needs for children. The child experts of that period said things like this: "Children will be happy if their parents are happy. Children will bounce back from their parents' divorce. The result of this law will be fewer divorces and more stable families." Sadly, this is not what happened. During the 1970s and 80s, as nearly every state passed a no-fault law, divorce became more and more widespread. Rather than stabilizing marriage, it encouraged people to see marriage as temporary. Unfortunately, one way to see how great marriage is for children is by measuring what too many of them experience when their parents' marriage falls apart or fails to form at all. And the fallout of divorce has been a real tragedy for children. As you'll see in the next couple of slides, and before you do, I want to show you what the slides do not show. They do not predict failure for a child of divorced parents or of a single parent. They simply show that a majority of children in these types of family structures are more likely to have similar life challenges. So children who grow up with their biological married parents are more likely than children of divorce or from a single-parent home to live longer, healthier lives, do better in school. They're more likely to attend college and to graduate. They are less likely to live in poverty. They are less likely to be in trouble with the law or to drink, do drugs, be violent, or sexually active as teenagers. They are less likely to be victims of sexual or physical violence, and they are more likely to have successful marriage when they are older. That's a pretty long list, and that's not even in detail. But let's look for a moment at just one of these aspects to see the difference in childhood experience. Previous to the last 50 years, poverty was a result of unemployment and low wages. But today, the experts say child poverty is a result of family structure. The vast majority of children raised in a married two-parent home will never be poor during childhood. By contrast, the vast majority of children who spend time in a single-parent home will experience poverty. So look at the next chart. It demonstrates the vast differences. The red line at the top, if you can tell that it's a red line, shows that single-mother families are more than 4 times more likely to live in poverty than married couple families, the gray line at the bottom. Let me pause again and just say that this does not mean that single parents don't work hard. I think they work harder than anybody else. And it's also not to say that they don't do the very best for their children. It's simply to point out that marriage makes an enormous difference, both for a child and for a parent. Judith Wallerstein was a researcher who set out in the early years of no-fault divorce to document what she and others believed to be a short-term crisis. She wrote, "The study was supposed to last 1 year, for we believed that normal, healthy people would be able to work out their problems following divorce in about 1 year's time. Indeed, we did not question the commonly held assumption that divorce was a short-lived crisis." She went on to become the author of one of the most foundational studies about divorce entitled The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce, a 25-year landmark study. And this is one of her conclusions. "We made radical changes in the family without realizing how it changes the experience of growing up. We embarked on a gigantic social experiment without any idea about how the next generation would be affected. If the truth be told, and if we are able to face it, the history of divorce in our society is replete with unwarranted assumptions that adults have made about children simply because such assumptions are congenial to adult needs and wishes." After more than 50 years of social science research about family structure, this following statement summarizes what we know to be best for children. "An extensive body of research tells us that children do best when they grow up with both biological parents in a low-conflict marriage. Thus, it is not simply the presence of two parents, as some have assumed, but the presence of two biological parents that seem to support child development." Generations of children are paying a very high price for the loss of permanency in our marriage culture. And all the while, the proof of God's design for families is right in front of us. We can see it in the research, such as what I've just shared with you, but we can also see it in our own families and communities. So I look at this and I can only conclude that all levels of society should be doing and working together to strengthen individual marriages and the culture of marriage. After all, Christian colleges cannot do the work alone. But rather than strengthening the one institution focused on giving children what they need most, another institutional aspect of marriage is sustaining a direct challenge: the effort to legally redefine marriage away from the one man, one woman definition. Those who are pushing for redefinition are largely ignoring what marriage is and who it helps. The conversation has revolved instead around the personal rights, the personal feelings, and romantic lives of adult men and women, just as it did for no-fault divorce. Consider for a moment that no-fault divorce made it easier for a spouse to leave. It didn't change the definition or the essence of marriage. Now compare that to the enormous change proposed that excludes either a man or a woman from the basis of the family. For our laws to say that either a man or a woman is unnecessary to marriage, and therefore to the foundation of family, is to make a profound statement. It's to say that either a father or a mother is unnecessary to a child. If marriage is redefined to exclude one sex or the other, we are saying in effect that it is a good thing for a child to be raised in a motherless or fatherless home. Can you think of any other situation in which we would say that it is a good thing for a child to be raised separated from one of his or her parents? We all know that a little boy or a little girl has lost something very precious when they do not have the love and care of a father or a mother. In fact, the goal of adoption is to respond to that tragedy and to give a child what he or she has lost. It is impossible to conceive a child without both a woman and a man. Biology gives every child both a father and a mother. Changing our laws to redefine marriage away from one man and one woman is, in effect, a stamp of approval on the intentionally motherless or intentionally fatherless family. We've never done that before here in America. Ultimately, similar to the no-fault divorce laws, redefining marriage is just another way to say to children that adult happiness and adult desires are more important than a child's need for what a child's need for a mom and a dad. Make no mistake, there will be consequences just as we've experienced from no-fault divorce if we redefine in law the one institution focused on giving every child what they most need. These ideas, what marriage is for, and the challenges to it are worth your full and thoughtful and prayerful consideration. Let's go around the corner and talk about you and the way that marriage is intertwined with the health of the church. At a Christian college like this, some of you are probably already studying the factors that contribute to a healthy church. Brad Wilcox is a researcher very interested in the matters of faith and family, and he's concluded that the family and the church rise and fall together. His research found that married people are much more likely than the unmarried to be in church on Sundays. Married couples are more likely to be active in their congregations, in their communities, and to have the financial wherewithal to support their local church. To be more specific, since the 1970s, there has been a decline in the number of people who attend church regularly, and research tells us that about 28% of that decline can be attributed to family change. In America, fewer adults married with children equals fewer people in church on Sunday morning. Researchers further estimate that churches would currently have 6.3 million more people attending if young Americans started married families at the same rate they did 30 years ago. And as it turns out, the link between church attendance and marriage is especially strong for men. Men are 57% less likely to attend church regularly if they are not married with children. Guys, that's why your mom wants you to marry quickly. Wilcox writes, "Marriage does more than bind a man to one woman. It also ties a man to a local congregation." But you've never thought about that before. So we've looked at how marriage supports the larger institution of the church. Let's see what it does for you. Did you know that there is something of a formula for successful marriage? And the majority of you in this audience already have a lot going for you. If a couple can graduate from high school, marry in their early to mid-20s instead of as teenagers, if they can marry before getting pregnant, get some college classes under their belts, and go to church regularly after they're married, make a decent income, that couple's chance of divorce is very, very low. And ladies, you probably know this much better than I do, but if you want to be married someday, Ozark Christian College is actually a pretty good place to be looking around for marriage material. According to studies, someone's really happy. According to studies, men who grew up with a married mom and dad and have a church-going family background are more likely than men from more secular backgrounds to seek marriage and to have positive views about women and about children. They're also more likely to be drawn to Christian college, so there you go. It's hard to believe, but there's more good news. Married people live longer, healthier lives. Marriage lowers the risk for both men and women that they will be the victim of violence, including domestic violence. Married people make more money, and it's not just because both the woman and the man might work. Married men actually make more money than unmarried men who have similar education and jobs. And I neglected to put it in, but I have a chart that shows that. The median income of married men living with their spouses is 64% greater. And anyway, I have a little bit more about that if you want to know. I'll be glad to show it to you. And marriage contributes to good mental health and the best kind of sex life. And in case you wondered, marriage itself makes the difference. None of the benefits I just mentioned apply if you're living together or cohabiting. Instead, living together is actually at the top of the list of contributors to divorce. A couple is more likely to divorce than to stay married if they live together first. That's how poisonous cohabitation is to successful marriage. I want to encourage each one of you who has the desire to marry to plan to marry. And I'm not talking about buying a dress or putting too much pressure on a first date. Make decisions every single day to cultivate deep personal relationship with God. The better you know and love Him, the more you will be able to trust where He leads. Align your emotional and sexual behavior every single day with your hope for marriage. These are decisions that do not cause regret. Do stuff. Enter and enjoy abundant life with people. You will make wonderful friends, and you will be an interesting, vibrant person. And this is just for free, this little bit of advice right here. Interesting, vibrant people limit the number of Friday nights they spend watching chick flicks and playing video games. And that's just the truth. Have you noticed that I haven't said the word love yet? While the feelings and emotions of love may draw you toward marriage, those feelings aren't going to keep you married. What aspect of love will keep you married? Let me give you the best definition of love that I've heard. Jay Budziszewski, a professor and author, defines love as this: a commitment of the will to the true good of the other person. So as a simple example might be the mother who won't let her child crawl into the dishwasher or into the dryer, no matter how much he cries, because she knows she's committed to his true good, and she knows that that's not good for him, and no amount of crying is going to change her mind. Well, how is this definition going to apply to you and apply today and in the future? What will your commitment to the true good of the man or woman you date look like? What will your commitment to the true good of your friends look like? What will your commitment to the true good of your friend look like when she tells you that she wants out of her marriage? What will your commitment to the true good of a friend look like when he tells you that he is attracted to the same sex? What will your love look like as you see the struggles of broken people who do not know the love of a father or a mother or a brother, let alone the love of Jesus Christ? The answers are not easy. True love is not easy, but it's worth it. And Jesus Christ is our example who showed us commitment to our true good all the way to the cross. There are a lot of ways to talk about marriage. Today I wanted to offer you reasons why it's so valuable to human thriving. But in closing, I want to leave you with the very highest vision of it. I don't think anyone has given more thought on marriage than John Piper in his excellent book, This Momentary Marriage. And I'm going to share a couple of quotes with you. The ultimate thing we can say about marriage is that it exists for God's glory. That is, it exists to display God. Marriage is patterned after Christ's covenant relationship to his redeemed people, the church, and therefore the highest meaning and the most ultimate purpose of marriage is to put the covenant relationship of Christ and his church on display. He writes a few paragraphs later, the most important implication is that keeping covenant with our spouse is as important as telling the truth about God's covenant with us in Jesus Christ. Marriage is not mainly about being or staying in love. It's mainly about telling the truth with our lives. It's about portraying something true about Jesus Christ and the way he relates to his people. It is about showing in real life the glory of the gospel. The meaning of marriage goes way beyond any one couple, not only in who it affects, as we've seen today, but in who it reflects, the one who designed man and woman to bear his image. The way you live out your faith to God's word and the commitment you make to a wife or husband will be the very best witness to Christ's presence in your life. Thank you very much today for your kind attention.